Hello guys, welcome to our class of number 11. And on last class we have something, you should have something similar to what I have right here. So we have this kind of obstacles that if we touch the obstacles, we kind of disappear. That's our game over for now. It's a little bit simple, but we can increment that later. It's just important that it actually exists, like we can have the contact with the pipes, and if we touch them we kind of lose. But yeah, we have one problem. Actually we have two problems that we're going to solve in this class. One of them is that first, the bird does not have any kind of animation, so it seems static. That's what we're going to be fixing today. And another problem is that I don't know how many pipes pass through. So that's one problem that we have. Like, we need to have some kind of a score related to the pipes. So when I pass like in the middle of a pipe, it should count as a score for me. So we have these two problems that we're going to solve in this class, so we can move on with our game development. Alright, so first of all, our bird does not have animation, right? So it's static, it doesn't move at all. That's kind of a problem. So how can we create animation inside of Unity? That's actually very, very simple, because if you go to your resource folder and bird, you already have the frames of the animation. You see them right here? They already exist. We just need to tell Unity that this guy right here, it's going to use all this frame, and then we can tell how long is going to take in between frames, so we can have a very cool animation effect. Okay, so in order to create an animation, first thing that you need to do is to select the object that you want to create some kind of animation. In this case, is going to be the player. And then with the object selected in the hierarchy, you're going to go to Window, Animation, and then again, Animation. All right, so it should open a window like this. Maybe not that big, maybe smaller, but it should open a window like this. Okay, so first of all, what Unity is letting us know is that this guy, this player, does not have any kind of animator or animation clip. So what is the difference between the animator and the animation clip? Animation clip is the animation itself, like the animation that we're going to create right now in this area, in this window right here. But the guy that controls the animation, it's called animator. So we have two different things inside of Unity. The animator, the part of the system that actually control which kind of animation is going to be playing. Because if you think about it, sometimes we have more than one animation per game object. So like, for example, our player could have one animation of dying, it could have one animation of explosion, and also an animation of flying. So we could have like three different kind of animations to only one game object. So we have one part of the system called Animator that actually is responsible to manage all the animation clips that exist inside of Unity. But what we are creating right now is an animation clip. Of course, in order to have the animation clip working, we are going to need Animator. So that's basically what Unity is telling us. To begin animating player, create an animator and an animation clip, and that's what we're going to be doing right now. So go here in the button, create, and then you just need to select the place. That's okay, I'm going to select the folder bird, just because you have already all the images for the animation. I think it's going to be easier to remember. And the name of the animation, this is the animation, right? Not the animator. The name of the animation is going to be fly, because that's what it is doing actually in the frames. So I'm going to save this. And what we have right here, after you create the animation, you have something called add property, and then you have a timeline. So we can animate any kind of property of a game object. We can animate like the transform position, we can animate the sprite rendering, sprite, we can animate the reach the body, we can animate anything that is right here in the inspector of the player. any kind of property. So if you go add property, you're going to see all the options that we have, and they are right here. And we have also like the scripts. You can select one script and change the information of them through a time, kind of animating them. What we are going to animate though is the sprite of the sprite render. So in order to do it, I'm not going to add any kind of animator right here, but like if you wanted, you could. What I'm going to do is just to select all the frames that I have inside of my bird folder, and then I'm going to drag and drop into here. It's going to automatically set the sprite from sprite render, as you can see right here. And then every single keyframe, it's representing one image that we dragged. So you can see right here, that is one image. And all the animation, as you can see, this is like, it's not even 7 seconds. It's way less than 7, like 1 second. If we play, you can see something like this. You see, it's too fast. It's not even 1 second. 1 second will be something like right here. This is 1 second. So what we can do, if you select all the keyframes, so I'm going to select all the keyframes, you're going to be able to see these little bars right here in the beginning and in the end of the keyframes. So if we pick the bar that is ending and drag, you can see that we are spacing the keyframes equally. So right now we can change the speed. You can see right now it's way better, right? You can make it faster or really slower. Just be careful, because if you make it very, very slow, you see that the animation kind of seems a little bit odd, you know? It's too low, the frame rate. So let's leave it in 1 second. I think 1 second is good, maybe even less. All right. After you do this, our animation is done. This animation is going to play automatically because it's the only one that exists. So the animator controller, this guy right here, it's going to play it automatically. So if we play the game, we already have the animation. Oops, let me play again. Oop. Yeah, I don't think I can actually win the game. Okay, so you see, we already have our animation working. All right, amazing. So, okay, we have our animation. The other part that we're going to be handling today is how to actually score in the game. So in the game we have the pipes, and the thing is, in order to score up like a score inside of the pipes, we need to pass through them, right? We need to pass through them right here. We need to detect when the players are going to pass through them. So just to be a little bit easier, I'm going to delete the rest of the pipes that I have, and I'm just going to let one exist, just so I can test it easily. And then later I can duplicate this pipe again, so I make sure that all the pipes are actually equally. So I need to pass in between the pipes. One way of doing this that we could make is just basically create another object with collision, and we can put inside of the pipes, and when we collide with that object, we could count some kind of score. That's not very good, because if we have something with collision, even though it's invisible, we will hit this thing and we are going to lose speed. So just as an example, don't do it what I'm going to be doing next. I'm just going to show as an example. So if we have an empty game object, and this game object have a box collider 2D like this, it's invisible, right? I could make it equally in the shape of in between the pipes right here. But the problem would be that when I hit this guy, I will lose speed, something like this. See, I can pass through them because we have a collider. So one thing that we're going to be doing, it's very similar to it, but we're going to say that it doesn't have a collision. It actually have a trigger. So a trigger, it's a it's like we use the same component. So, but it doesn't have the collision part. So we can have the information when an object enters the space of the collider without actually colliding with it. So it's almost like a ghost. You can enter inside of the ghost, you know that you're inside, it can feel you, but you don't have any collision with you because it's not a physical body. So yeah, we're going to make pretty much the same thing. So in order to create this trigger, we're going to go to game object, create empty, just the way that we did before. And one thing that we're going to be doing, the first, I'm going to rename this one to score trigger, just to be a little bit easier to remember that is the trigger of my pipe. And another thing that we'll do is I'm gonna add component box collider 2D. So if you don't have it there, just search for box collider, it should appear right here. And then I just need to make sure that it fits exactly the space in between the pipe so the player can get the score if it enters the pipe. So just to make sure, I'm gonna make it fit exactly. Okay, that looks good. But then I will set is trigger in the box collider. So it's still working as a box collider because they have the same component, but it doesn't have the same, it doesn't have the collision part of the box collider. So it is a trigger. So right now, if I play the game, you can see that the bird actually, if you play the game right, you can see that the bird actually can pass through the trigger. And this trigger will send a message, will actually activate a function very similar to on collision enter. Okay, so it's going to work in a very similar way, but without having without the collision. So I'm gonna open the play manager. What we have right here is on collision enter 2D, collision 2D. And that's right, it's using almost the same thing, but it doesn't have a collision, although it actually have a collider. So that's what we're going to be writing in here. So right here, I'm going to write void on trigger, actually, on trigger enter 2D collider 2D cool. You can even use the same name, so cool right there. So this is working the same way as this. The only difference is that actually it's using collider instead of collision there. Alright, so we're going to be actually handling in a very similar way. So one thing that we can make just to test is to make a debug right here and say like I enter the pipe, or I score. I'm gonna put I score. So if you enter a trigger, you're going to be having I score in your console. So I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna play the game. Okay, so you see, I score. That's one thing that we're going to be using. But the same way that we have a problem with collision that actually will detect any kind of collision, like with other game objects, we will have the same problem with trigger, because Unity does not know which trigger it is. So one thing that we're going to be doing right here, we're going to select score trigger, go to tag, add tag, and then here we have pipe, but we're going to add a new one. And this one is going to be score. Okay, so we have pipe and we have score. In the script, I will say to Unity the same thing. If the tag of the game object is equal to score, so it's the score, the trigger that I'm entering, I'm going to debug log I score. So I'm gonna do the same thing, but later we are going to add a new score point to this. So it's gonna be a little bit different. So if we go right here on Unity, I'm gonna actually add another trick just to test. So I'm just gonna, you don't need to add this one. I'm just gonna show to you guys that it's not gonna work with other box colliders. So I'm gonna make another box collider fairly big after this one, but without the tag. Okay, so I'm gonna put after this is score trigger. It's untagged right now, so what we're going to be doing is add score as a tag, and the another is not gonna have any tags, and it's gonna be a trigger also. Okay, so we're going to have this. I'm gonna let me clean the console right here. So if we play the game, we'll have something like this. Oh, come on, I need to survive in order to test. Okay, so you see that it pressed I score only, actually pressed twice, but I think it's because I didn't clean up the first time when I died. Okay, so we have I scored and only once, so it doesn't score when you enter the second trigger due to the tag. Alright, so I'm gonna delete this another, and in order to save the scores that we have in the game, we are going to use a variable. So I deleted the debug right here, we're not gonna use this one, and in class manager, let's create a new variable, a new integer variable called score, so we can have track of how many scores we have. So public int score, and in start score will be equal to 0, because that makes sense. When every time that you start a game, the score needs to be equal to 0 because you don't have any score yet. And then score will be incremented if we enter the trig named score. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna clean the console. I'm not gonna maximize it so we can actually see the variable. And here on play manager, I have score equals to 0. Let me play the game. We will have, okay, I need to win the game. Okay, let me do something. Let me make this pipe easier to pass because I'm actually dying every time. Okay, I think that's gonna be better. All right, so score is 0. When I pass through the trigger, it's 1. So it's picking the right, it's getting the trigger. You know, when I changed the space between pipes, it didn't change the spaces of the trigger. So you need to be careful with it, okay? The spaces of the trigger need to match the space of the pipes. And then after this, I'm just gonna drag and drop the score trigger into the pipe. So every time that I move the score, the score trigger, it's gonna move the trigger as well. And then what I can do is actually drag, like copy and paste, duplicate a lot of different pipes right here so I can test. So if I play the game, let me have the variable watching right here. So score equals to 0. If I play the game, I will have 1, 2. Okay, I had 2. Let me try to finish the line so we have. Okay, even though it's easy, it's not that easy. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So I'm gonna pause the game right now. You can see the score right here is equal to 3. So okay, so our score is working. We have a game right here. This is already a game. Maybe it's a little bit unfair because the player cannot see this, but we have a game. You can lose the game, you can win the game, and if you have like a map that is big enough, you will have a very funny game. I'm just gonna you can see that the camera is a little bit too, I don't know, maybe you can make the camera bigger or smaller just to fit more pipes, and you can make it harder or easier to play. I'm just gonna make it easier so we can test it better, but it doesn't really You can make it very hard if you want it. All right, so that's the pipe. The next step that we need to take is to show the player this kind of new information that we have. So in order to show the player this new information, we are going to need to use another thing called user interface, that another part of Unity that I'm going to explain on next class. So on next class, we're going to show how many scores and any other kind of information actually that we can have in the game with this component called user interface. All right, so thank you guys very much for watching this class. See you on next class when we are going to be starting messing up with the graphical user interface part. Thank you very much. See ya.